After my father died, my mother said there was no inheritance left until a stranger sent me documents revealing millions missing. I remember the exact way she said it, like she had already rehearsed it 100 times before I even asked. No inheritance, nothing left for you. She didn't look at me when she said it. My father had only been gone for 3 weeks. The house still smelled like hospital disinfectant and old flowers people brought and forgot to take home. I was sitting at the edge of the couch, still wearing the same black shirt I had worn to the funeral. At first I thought she was joking in that tired, cruel way grief sometimes shows up, but she wasn't. She was already folding his clothes. That was the first thing that felt wrong. My dad wasn't just a normal salary man. He worked in logistics consulting for years. We weren't rich, but we were never struggling either. He talked about investments once in a while, not in detail, just enough for me to know there were accounts, plans, long-term security stuff, as he called it. So when my mother said there was nothing left, I didn't understand. I asked her again. She snapped, "There is nothing, stop asking." That was the moment I noticed her hands shaking, not from grief, but from something sharper, fear. At the time, I told myself I was imagining it, but the feeling didn't go away. The next days blurred together. Relatives came and left. People brought food we barely touched. My mother handled everything like she was on autopilot, except whenever I mentioned finances, she shut down completely. Every time. It became a pattern I couldn't ignore. If I asked about my father's accounts, she would suddenly remember an errand. If I asked about his lawyer, she would say, "It's handled." If I asked about paperwork, she would tell me to trust her. But trust her for what, exactly? That question started eating at me. A week after the funeral, I went to my father's old desk. My mother had already cleaned most of it out. Drawers empty, papers gone, even his pen holder replaced. But in the back corner of the bottom drawer, I found a single key taped under the wood. Old habit. My father always hid spare keys like that. My hands were shaking when I peeled it off. I didn't tell my mother. That night, I waited until she was asleep and opened his locked cabinet in the study. Inside were folders, a lot of them. Bank statements, investment summaries, legal documents. Some were organized neatly, others looked rushed, like someone had stopped mid-process. And then I saw numbers that didn't match anything my mother had said. One account alone showed balances in the hundreds of thousands. Another had recurring transfers labeled trust allocation. There was even a folder marked Estate Planning Final Revision. My chest tightened as I flipped through page after page. This wasn't nothing left. This was a life-changing amount of money. And it was gone. Not all of it, but enough of it was missing that the pattern was impossible to ignore. Large withdrawals, transfers to unfamiliar entities, signatures that looked like my father's but felt slightly off when I compared them. Something about them didn't sit right. I remember sitting on the floor, surrounded by papers, realizing I was shaking so hard I could barely hold them steady, because there were only two possibilities. Either my father had hidden assets I never knew about and never told anyone, or someone had moved them after he died, and the only person with access, my mother. The next morning I tried to bring it up casually over breakfast. "Did Dad ever mention offshore accounts to you?" She froze mid-sip, just for a second, then she set the cup down carefully. "No," she said, too quickly. "Why would you ask that?" That was my first real clue that she wasn't just grieving. She was managing something. I told her I found some old paperwork. Her face changed immediately, not anger, panic. "You went through his things?" she asked, voice low. I needed answers. She stood up so fast the chair scraped the floor. "Stop, you are not doing this. Your father's affairs are closed." That word stuck in my head, closed, not settled, not completed. Closed, like a case file. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the missing money, the signatures, the strange transfers, and something else. My mother's certainty. She wasn't confused. She wasn't grieving and unsure. She knew exactly what she was saying. 2 days later, I got the message that changed everything. It came from an unknown email address. No subject line, just a single attachment and a short message. "You deserve to know where the money went. Don't trust your mother." I stared at it for a full minute without opening anything. My first instinct was scam. My second was worse. What if it wasn't? I opened the attachment. It was a scanned set of documents. Bank audit reports, transaction trails, internal compliance notes, and my father's name everywhere. But not just his name, my mother's too. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then I saw the structure. Accounts linked to a holding company I had never heard of. Funds being moved in layers, from my father's corporate accounts into a shell entity. Then split again. Then transferred into personal accounts under different names. And one of those names belonged to my mother. My stomach dropped so hard I had to sit down, because it wasn't just money disappearing. It was being redirected, systematically, over years. I read the documents 3 times before I even noticed my hands were numb. The email had no sender name, but there was a signature at the bottom of one file. Internal Compliance Review MR. I didn't know who MR was, but I knew what I was looking at. Someone inside the financial system had flagged this. And someone had decided I should see it. That night, I didn't confront my mother, not yet. I needed more, so I replied to the email, just one sentence. "Who are you?" The response came less than an hour later. "I worked with your father's accounts. I can't say more over email, but your mother is not telling you the truth." My heart started pounding. I asked for proof. They sent another file. This one was worse. It was a timeline, a full breakdown of transactions leading up to my father's death. And right in the middle of it, something stood out. A large transfer labeled pre-execution estate adjustment. It happened 3 days before my father was hospitalized, which meant one of two things. Either he knew he was going to die, or someone moved money before he did. I felt sick reading it, because now it wasn't just financial fraud. It was starting to look like planning. I asked the stranger to meet me. They refused at first, then sent a location. A small coffee shop near the edge of the city, the kind my father used to say only exists because people need somewhere quiet to disappear. I went the next day. I didn't tell my mother. The person I met was not what I expected. A woman, maybe mid-40s, tired eyes, careful posture. She didn't introduce herself fully, just said, "You shouldn't have been left in the dark." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were printed bank logs, internal memos, and a photocopy of a signed directive. My father's signature again, but this time there was a note attached. Authorization confirmed by spouse. Spouse, not name, not signature, spouse authorization. My hands went cold. "She approved it?" I asked. The woman didn't answer immediately, then she said something I wasn't ready for. "Your mother had access to everything." I felt something break in my head because that didn't match the version I had been living in, the grieving widow, the exhausted partner. The woman claiming there was nothing left. The woman folding his clothes like everything was already over. None of it fit anymore. I asked the only question I could manage. "Where is the money now?" She hesitated, then said, "Split. Some offshore, some reinvested, some untraceable even by internal systems. And my mother, she benefited from it directly." I left the cafe without finishing my drink. The air outside felt wrong, like I had stepped into a different version of my life for the first time. I didn't just feel confused. I felt betrayed in a way that made everything else look fake. But there was still a gap I couldn't understand. Why would my mother tell me there was nothing left if she had access to millions? That didn't make sense unless she didn't want me to find it, or she didn't want me to inherit it. That night I confronted her. I didn't ease into it. I just said, "I know about the accounts." She didn't move, not immediately. Then she slowly set down the plate she was holding. "What accounts?" she asked, but her voice wasn't curious. It was controlled. I told her everything I knew, the offshore transfers, the shell company, the email, the documents. Her face changed slowly as I spoke, not shock, not confusion, calculation. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then she said something I'll never forget. "You shouldn't have looked into that." That was it, no denial, no explanation, just regret that I found it. I asked her why. Her voice cracked for the first time. "Because it was supposed to be protected." "Protected from what?" I asked. She looked at me like she was deciding whether I was still her son or something else entirely. "From people who would take everything." That answer made my stomach twist because it didn't explain anything. It only added more questions, and then she said something that changed everything again. "Your father didn't tell you the full plan." I froze. "What plan?" She sat down slowly, like her body had finally given up on holding the weight of it. "There was money, yes, but it wasn't safe. Not in his name, not in ours. There were legal threats, tax issues, and people watching him for years." I remembered the compliance documents, the audit flags, the timing of transfers. She continued. "He worked with people he shouldn't have. When he realized it, he started moving things to protect it." "Protect it for who?" I asked. Her eyes finally met mine. "For you." That hit harder than anything else. Because it didn't fit the story I had built, she kept going. "The transfers you saw weren't theft. They were concealment. He was trying to shield assets from seizure if something happened to him." I thought about the timing again, 3 days before hospitalization. "Then why tell me there was nothing left?" I asked. Her face tightened. "Because after he died, the people involved came back for it." My mind struggled to keep up. "Who?" She shook her head. "I don't know all of them, but I know enough. And I know what happens when families start asking questions." That was the first moment I realized she wasn't just hiding money. She was hiding danger. The stranger's documents suddenly felt different. Not just evidence of theft, but evidence of exposure. I asked her about the millions. Her answer was quiet. "It's not gone. It's hidden again, somewhere safer than here." "Safer for who?" I asked. She didn't answer, but her silence said enough. The next morning, I went back to the email thread. I asked the stranger one final question. "Did my father know what my mother did?" The reply came instantly. "Yes, and he trusted her with it." That was the final piece that broke everything open, because now nothing was simple, not theft, not protection, not grief. Everything was layered over something else I still couldn't fully see. And then the stranger sent one last file, a recorded internal note from my father's lawyer. In it, he said something I still hear when I close my eyes. "If anything happens to me, she will say there was nothing left. Let her. It's the only way to keep it out of reach." My hands went cold, because suddenly my mother's words made a different kind of sense. Not honesty, not denial, but instruction. And I realized the most terrifying part wasn't that the money disappeared. It was that both of them may have agreed to make me believe it did. Now I don't know what I was supposed to inherit, or what I was protected from. But I do know this. Someone out there thought I was not ready to see the truth, and now that I have seen part of it, I'm not sure if I'm safe knowing it at all.